I took a road trip across Western Canada, driving from Calgary all the way to Vancouver with plenty of stops to see glaciers, lakes, waterfalls, and a lot of other surprising stuff along the way. My nights were spent sleeping everywhere from a luxury hotel overlooking one of the world's most iconic lakes to one of the worst motels I've ever stepped foot in. And my days consisted of exploring the breathtaking Rocky Mountain landscapes. I mean, I've been to natural wonders across every continent except Antarctica. And Western Canada is at the top of the list when it comes to awe-inspiring nature. Although Banff National Park is a unique site of natural beauty, there's still so much more in Western Canada that I discovered. And luckily enough, I got everything on camera. And in this video, I'll be sharing this memorable road trip of mine with you. Hey folks, David G here. Welcome to Western Canada. I'm starting my trip here in Calgary, and I'm spending a few nights at a DoubleTree by Hilton for around $100 a night. It's a decent deal for Calgary, and the free diamond breakfast is definitely a plus. But since it's my first time in this Canadian city, I'm going out on the town. But going out on the town looks a little bit different over here in Calgary. So I decided to come over to Nose Hill Park for a few hours just to walk around, and it's actually located in the city of Calgary. Right now you can't see the city, but normally you should be able to. But I have the feeling that it's fixing to clear up here soon. In the meantime, these First Nations medicine wheels are interesting to visit. The fog's starting to go away, so you can kind of see that there's part of Calgary behind me. And by the way, Nose Hill Park is the 4th largest urban park in Canada, but I really wonder if the 3 larger parks are this nice to go on a hike in. Less than an hour ago, it was super foggy out here, and now look at this sunshine. That's pretty much the story of weather in Western Canada, to my understanding. I've been wanting to come out here for at least 5 years now, and there was a lot of planning involved. I've been keeping my eye on the prices over the past few years, and this fall just turned out to be when airfare, a place to stay, and my schedule fell into perfect alignment. But other than getting here and sleeping somewhere, this part of Canada is not all that expensive compared to other parts of North America. I mean, I really only had to budget around $40 a day for food and drink. And then a one-way car rental for 1 week costs about $300. That's from Calgary to Vancouver. Anyway, this is my only full day in Calgary, so I think it's time to head downtown and see what we find. Downtown Calgary is right on the Bow River, and the fall foliage is amazing. I'm sure it's nice in other seasons, but this is really a special time to visit. Believe it or not, this is Calgary. There's good public transport to take you around town, and the library is a beautiful piece of architecture that serves as an important cultural center. Then the Calgary Tower is iconic, though it's not quite the tallest building in town. And the city just feels very walkable. Plus, you can't go to Calgary without trying ginger beef. It's a Canadian Chinese dish that was created in the 1970s, and it's pretty tasty. Calgary is definitely a place where you could spend more than just a few days, and it's even ranked as one of the world's top 10 most livable cities every single year since 2015. But the Rockies are calling, and it's time to set off on my road trip. The drive from Calgary to Banff only takes a little over an hour. On the road about half an hour before the park, Lac des Arcs is a nice place to take a break. Right before entering Banff National Park, there's a town named Canmore that's definitely worth a stop. There's a lot of nice restaurants here and other stuff to do too. I even found it a bit nicer than the town of Banff itself. But Banff does have one pretty big advantage over Canmore. The town of Banff is located inside Banff National Park. But the main attraction here is really the vast, beautiful nature, and you can access great hikes right from the town. The Tunnel Mountain Summit Trail is the park's most popular hike, and it's a nice way to get to a mountain peak as an intermediate hiker. It does happen to be Banff's lowest mountain peak, but the views are still worth it. By the way, the per person entrance fee is $10.50 in Canadian dollars, but if you pay for one day, you get the second free. Well, to be exact, you get the second day free until 4 p.m. Entrance is also good for other national parks in the area like Yoho or Kootenay. So you really won't break the bank on park entrance fees out here in the Canadian Rockies. Then the 3 main places people stay around here are Banff Town behind me, then Canmore where I'll be staying tonight, and then Lake Louise where I'm going to stay tomorrow night. While I didn't stay in the town of Banff on this trip, there are a lot of great options there. There's even a luxury Fairmont resort that some people like to say is haunted.
Is it haunted or is it not?
But given the Fairmont was charging somewhere around $600 for the night I needed to stay, I skipped that one and opted for what turned out to be by far the nicest Super 8 by Wyndham I've ever seen in neighboring Canmore. I did stay at the Fairmont Lake Louise though, and we'll get to that a bit later in this video. A good place in Banff National Park to get nice views at dusk is Vermilion Lakes, and it's so close to Banff town you could even walk there.
I'm already on my second day here in Banff, and I can say there's lots to do here. Beyond just going to the town, there are just tons and tons of hikes. I can imagine spending a week or even like a month here and just seeing new stuff every day, basically. They even have a pretty decent public transport system that goes to some of the main sites, but I'm pretty happy that I chose a car. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to go to where I am now, for example, and a lot of the different hikes that I've done. There's also some abandoned buildings in Banff National Park that are worth checking out.
This is actually the old site of a coal mining operation.
This one here is just about a 10-minute drive away from Banff town.
And down the way there's an entire ghost town that some consider to be cursed.
It's been interesting to see which sites have a lot of tourists and which don't in Banff. This is one of the ones that has almost nobody visiting it, at least right now.
But I made a separate video about it if you're interested to know more. Overall, fall is just a great time to be out and about with the foliage and mild temperatures, and I just got a little bit lucky with the good weather.
It's also important to keep in mind that Western Canada is bear country. There's both grizzlies and black bears out here, but just taking a few precautions usually means you're going to be okay. And the statistics of even coming across a bear are really small. Another nice spot in the park is Johnston Canyon. Johnston Canyon has a pretty extensive hiking network, and all along the way you'll see beautiful waterfalls. So you can hike just like 1 mile, or you can go for like 5 miles and you'll still see something great. Beautiful. It also happens to be about maybe a 20-minute drive from downtown Banff, so it's very easy to get to. To get here, you've got to go on a smaller road, and there's a lot of active wildlife. I even saw a wolf this morning.
But unfortunately, I was driving and was not able to get it on camera. Other than the wolf that I saw, my wildlife spotting was mostly limited to elk, deer, and mountain sheep. In all honesty though, spotting wildlife was just not a huge priority for me on this trip. But in the national parks out here, you can spot wolverines, grizzly bears, and tons of other wildlife if you're lucky. But I really wanted to step foot in as many of the parks out here as possible, so I made a detour to take a hike in Kootenay National Park before heading up to Lake Louise.
Right next door, just a little bit west of Banff, you've got Kootenay National Park, which is where I am now.
My stop in Kootenay National Park was short, but I'm really glad I made it. There was hardly anyone else out hiking, and the trail took you through these old-growth forests, over a river, and up to a collection of what are known as paint pots, which are brightly colored mineral water pools that look like something completely out of this world.
I was intrigued by the paint pots, so I just drove over here. They call these paint pots because the soil and water combine and make this kind of yellow orangish thing everywhere. So orange. Wow. Would you expect to find this in the Rocky Mountains? Kootenay, check. What else are we going to find on our drive to Vancouver?
And to get to Kootenay, I actually had to leave the province of Alberta and enter the province of British Columbia. So during my return drive to Banff to get to Lake Louise, I made a pit stop at the provincial borderline.
British Columbia is over there.
During my week-long road trip, I simply didn't have time to visit Yoho National Park. And I can't help but stress that the more time you can spend out in the Canadian Rockies, the better. Luckily, I did find the time to visit Jasper National Park, which was a real treat. But first, let's see what it's like staying at a luxury hotel on Lake Louise. The Fairmont Chateau Lake Louise is pretty historic. The original hotel was built in the late 1800s in conjunction with the railroad, with the goal of bringing more visitors to the area. The actual hotel experience that I had wasn't so stellar, though the breakfast was on point and the deal I got was pretty competitive for a luxury hotel with pristine natural surroundings. But what really stands out at the Fairmont Chateau Lake Louise is, well, Lake Louise.
That's a lake it is.
Neighboring Moraine Lake was closed for the season, and going further north, seasonal closures are worth considering if you'll be traveling outside of summer. But Lake Louise itself was 110% worth the visit, and by staying right on the lake, it's easy to beat the morning rush for the popular lakeside hike. But my morning hike was just a start to the magnificent lakes that I'd see driving up the Icefields Parkway to the town of Jasper.
This is my first stop at Bow Lake.
This lake was formed from the runoff of the Bow Glacier, which is just beyond the mountains here. And even though I'm only beginning my journey up north for the day, it's already feeling much windier and colder. Luckily, I've got all the right clothes for the weather. There's also a popular lodge over here at Bow Lake, but remember those seasonal closures I was talking about? This lodge is closed for the season and there's hardly anyone around here. Most of the businesses, including gas stations, are closed between here and the town of Jasper too. But just up the Parkway, there's a much more lively hiking spot. You wouldn't even know it's the shoulder season there. In contrast to what I saw at Bow Lake, the
Peyto Lake hike seems to be one of the more popular ones. The parking lot's still full and it's off season. Never seen a crow that big before.
The hike is very easy and the views are just great. The weather on the Icefields Parkway can really change fast throughout the day. And I came right at the right time to view the light blue waters of Peyto Lake and the extensive mountain chain beyond it. Peyto Lake would be my last stop within Banff National Park, since the Icefields Parkway runs through both Banff and Jasper National Parks. And you could drive the Icefields Parkway in about 3 hours without making any stops. But there are so many beautiful places to see along the way, and it's always hard to decide where to stop when you're limited on time, let alone pick a favorite. But my first stop upon entering Jasper National Park would be a strong competitor for that favorites category. Instead of calling it my favorite though, I'll just settle for telling you that the Athabasca Glacier took my breath away in the best of ways. This is the most visited glacier in North America, which is likely due to it being so easily accessible from the roadside. You can just walk up to it, and there were no tour groups to be seen as I was visiting pretty late in the day.
My only regret is that I don't have enough time to do the whole hike right up to the actual glacier, but I think I saw a good glimpse of it.
With a few hours before nightfall and a ways left to drive, I had time for one more stop before getting to Jasper for the night. Since the popular Columbia Icefield Skywalk was already closed for the day, I had time for just one more stop before calling it a night.
This used to be a waterfall. And this is also my last stop of the day. Athabasca Falls.
Lucky for me, this part still is a waterfall.
And the other side of the fall. Both sides of the fall. The canyon goes on for a long, long time. It's really amazing how blue the water is everywhere out here in the rivers and lakes. And tomorrow I'm gonna wake up in Jasper and then drive to British Columbia. It's not very far from where I am in Alberta, to be honest. But then I've got about 9 hours of driving ahead of me, so that should be a lot. Stopping overnight in Kamloops and then end the trip in Vancouver. By the way, if you've been enjoying this video, then give it a like and consider subscribing to my channel for more like it. This little rental car's been doing pretty good too. Now for the local hotel up in Jasper. Pretty nice view in the morning. Old Canadian hotel has been pretty good. This hotel actually has really nice paintings everywhere. The animal of the city is, you guessed it, the bear.
The town of Jasper is pretty cozy, and it reminded me a lot of towns I'd visited in upstate New York. The train
Comes over to Jasper as well, but it's quite expensive.
and much of Jasper National Park feels a lot more remote than Banff. And with just part of a day left, I had to really narrow down what I visited. But right near the town of Jasper, there are some great things to check out. Plus, my park pass was still valid until 4 p.m. So I started my morning at the town's Tim Hortons and then headed over to Pyramid Lake for a short walk on its island.
These wild juniper berry bushes are like everywhere in the Rocky Mountains. They smell really good.
Pyramid Lake was really the perfect place to start off the day. And after a nice morning walk around the island, I drove over to check out the nearby Maline Canyon. Well, technically it's a gorge, and it's got really nice hiking trails that feature 6 different bridges crossing it.
It's quite a hike, so you could just walk over one of the bridges or you could go for all 6.
I ended up doing 5 out of 6.
Little climb. Wasn't as little of a climb as I thought it was. Wow. And the sun's back out again. But I've got to say, there's nothing else like these national parks out there. Between Banff and Jasper, I've seen many things that I've never seen anywhere else. It's just been an amazing experience. And today I'm headed onwards, out of the parks, and on to Kamloops, about a 5-hour drive. And then after that, I'm gonna get up early the next day and drive over to Vancouver. Should be a little bit under 4 hours depending on traffic. I'm really not sure what I was thinking climbing up here. Whoa! This is the 5th bridge. And the 6th bridge is quite a walk, so I'm gonna have to skip it. So the hike over to the 5th bridge was a little long, but luckily there's a kind of shortcut hike to get back. It's about 2/3 of the length of the one that goes down by the gorge. It does skip a lot of the highlights though, so make sure to only take it one way. Well, this is my last stop in the Rockies, at least in a national park. And I'm pretty sad to leave, but yeah, I think I'll have to come back sometime.
But even though I was sad to be leaving the national parks, the drive through rural Western Canada was interesting.
I got some rain after 3 days.
And the weather didn't really fully clear up for me until the following morning in Kamloops. But the Hampton by Hilton over in Kamloops really did a good job. And when I got in after my 6-hour drive, I was able to track down a great Korean barbecue place. And it's not just a coincidence that I'm showing you Canadian Asian food more than once. Western Canada is full of magnificent restaurants serving up food with its roots in many different Asian countries. After I watched the weather clear up first thing in the morning from my window, I grabbed some free breakfast and was headed back on the road to Vancouver. The sky stayed clear for a little while, but once I got closer to Vancouver, it got gray and rainy again quick. But for all the driving I did in Canada, it was one of the most enjoyable times I had driving anywhere. Driving in much of the world can just turn out to be stressful, but
driving in Canada is pretty much a breeze. One thing to keep in mind is the gas costs a bit more than in the US. It is significantly cheaper in the province of Alberta than it is in British Columbia. So if you're doing what I did and driving from Calgary to Vancouver, you probably want to fuel up right before leaving Alberta. It's still not as expensive as you'd find in Europe. Larger cities do have some traffic, but if you're traveling, that's pretty easy to plan around. There's rush hours, so just keep that in mind. And then the only other thing that can kind of delay you is that there's often construction on the roads out here. There is pretty decent public transport between a lot of cities. I did find that it often costs more than driving though, especially if you're more than just one person in the car. You really just have to look at the specifics of the route that you plan to take, and then, you know, the time of year and the pricing of renting a car versus taking public transport and all that kind of stuff. It's going to differ depending on what your plans are. Well, because Vancouver is such a crazy expensive city, I just spent one night here. But there's still ways to do it on a budget in Vancouver. Very strange hotel.
This place was thoroughly uncomfortable and had a prominent smell of some kind of chemicals, likely pest control. I guess I should just be happy I didn't see any pests and the location was central. I gave the car back at the airport and returned to my normal reality of taking public transport and walking. But Vancouver is a walkable place, and it was prime time for viewing the red maple trees. Stanley Park is a great place for walking, and the seawall offers some of the best views of the city.
In Vancouver, a walk along the seawall is a definite must.
And it was easy to find great Thai food for dinner, and even some matcha soft serve for dessert next door. But the next day I just had to go traditional Canadian and head to the nearest Tim Hortons.
Affordable food in Canada.
Then for lunch I kept with tradition and had some root beer and a burger from A&W.
This bathroom on this bus is available while I'm driving as well.
But I'd recommend a trip to Western Canada to just about anyone, and I sure hope you've enjoyed watching my trip. If you did, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to my channel for many more travel videos around the world. Thanks for watching, and give this video a watch next. I bet you'll like it.